Boker Tov, Moadim L'Simcha. Today's Daf Yomi is Yevamos Daf Mem Beis, Yevamos 42. We're going to start on the very bottom of Mem Aleph on the Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. The Gemara is discussing the idea of Havchana. Havchana is that where we want to make sure, we want to draw a distinction, we want to know who the father is. So therefore, we require a woman, after she was married to one man, to wait 3 months before marrying the other man to make sure we know who the father is. So in the bottom of Mem Aleph Amud Beis, the Gemara says, Taner Rabbanan, Yevamos shechaltzu la'achem b'toch shlosha. Let's say there was a woman who had chalitza, she would fall into yibum, and the brothers who were required to do either yibum or chalitza with her did the chalitza, but they did it within 3 months. They're supposed to wait 3 months, but they did it within 3 months. So under those circumstances, she needs to wait. She needs to wait 3 months until she has 3 months from the day of death. Rashi says that she needs to wait the 3 months in order to make certain we know who the father is. Now on the top of 43a, but after 3 months from the death of her husband, meaning to say, then under those circumstances, then under those shlosha chadashim. But if the brothers had done the chalitza with her 3 months after the death of the husband, she doesn't need to wait 3 months after that in order to get married. Meaning to say, if the chalitza had happened within 3 months of the death of her husband, then she still has to wait in order to get married 3 months from the death of her husband. But if the chalitza happened 3 months after the death of her husband, then she can get married immediately. And we don't say that she has to wait 3 months from the moment of the chalitza, because we're not going to be concerned that maybe she had relations with her Yavam within 3 months of the chalitza, because the chalitza proves that she never had any relations. And so therefore, have a shlosha chadashim sha'amru. So we learn from here that, we learn from this idea that when the rabbi said you have to wait 3 months before getting married, mishas misas habal mishas chalitza sayavam, that the 3 months you have to wait comes from the death of the husband and not from the chalitza of the yavam. So the Gemara says, "Ma'ishnami get." Then why is this case different from a get? Because under these circumstances, that from the time of a get, we say the following law: the Rav taught in the Gemara in Gittin Yud Chesam Aleph. Rav taught that when it comes to divorce, we say mishas nesina, that we count 3 months from the moment when the get was given, and we don't say. Rashi says, and even though from the time where the get was written, we know for sure that the ex-husband was not with his ex-wife, because if that would be the case, it would be what's called a get yashan, an old get, and it would be disqualified. So here we count from the time of the get, we say it was from the time it was given, and we don't say, even though we know for sure they weren't together intimately, we say that we start counting only from the time it was given. How come here also we should say from the time of chalitza, even though we know for sure they weren't together from the time of death? Why? Just like by a get, we count from the moment the get was given. Here too, we should count from the moment of chalitza and not from the time of death. So Shmuel Amar Mishas Kasiva, and Shmuel there says it's from the time of the writing. So Shmuel is consistent with what we say about chalitza, that it goes from the time of death. But Rav is inconsistent. So Gemara answers, Amar Rava. Rava says, no, Kal v'chomer. The reason why we count by chalitza from the time of the death, and not from the time of chalitza, not from the time of that action, we count 3 months from the time of death, is we say it's a logical argument. Iser kares, when it comes to Rashi says, Iser kares liyavam hataras la'achar gimel chadashim miyad, meaning to say, when it comes to, when we say if he doesn't want to do, let's say he wouldn't want to do chalitza, he would only want to do yibum, that if she would be pregnant under those circumstances with an offspring, then we're going to say and he'll do Yibum with Iser Karis. Then it's going to be a prohibition of Karis. And nevertheless, we say, Hitarta, but nevertheless, we allow him to do the Yibum as soon as those 3 months have passed, because most women were going to say their pregnancy would be visible. So therefore, since when it comes to the Isser of Kares, when it comes to them actually doing the sexual act of Yibum, there we allow it immediately after 3 months. And even though we're saying that the potential there is for a prohibition of Kares, so Isser Lav, the idea of her remarrying, which is just a regular prohibition, because it says that's just the regular prohibition. There is just a regular prohibition. Well, Kol Shekain, for sure we're going to say it should be permitted by 3 months from the time of death. And so therefore, the reason why we don't compare it to get is because we have a logical argument that Yibum is different, that since we allow the Yibum, the intimacy itself after 3 months, for sure we're going to allow the Chalitza after 3 months, because the Yibum, it's a prohibition of Kares, and the Chalitza is a prohibition of just the regular love. So now the Gemara says, that we learned to the Mishnah, so too this concept of avchana, of waiting 3 months, it applies to all the women who became widowed or divorced. They should not get betrothed or married until they wait 3 months. So the Gemara says, Bishlama Yevaman, Bishlama, when it comes to a Yevama, I understand that she has to wait 3 months. Kida Amr, like we learned back on Mem Aleph on the Beis, that we're concerned by Yevama that maybe she is pregnant from the first husband, and therefore he's going to be Pogea be'eshes avim, be'eshes achiv, and she'esh lo banim. He's going to be with his. There's a concern that he's with his brother's wife who has children, and so therefore that's a prohibition of kares. So we understand why you have to wait 3 months. By your Yevama, Ela Shar Kohen Nashim Amai. Why, when it comes to all the other women, do we say you need to wait 3 months? What's the reasoning? So what's the reasoning? There's no concern. There's no concern of your brother's wife there. What's the reason you have to wait 3 months? So Amar Nachman, Amar Shmuel. So Nachman says in the name of Shmuel, the reason why you have to wait 3 months is Mishum the Amar Kra, because the verse states, so it says in the verse, it says in Genesis 17, verse 7, I will establish a covenant, and you need to be for and from the fact it says for your seed after you, we see from here that you need to know who your seed is. You need to know who's the seed of the first husband and who's the seed of the second husband. So since we want to know who the seed is, therefore for this reason, you have to wait 3 months in order to determine who the seed is. So Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. So Rav Nachman says in the name of, so Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. So he gives it, I just read that. So therefore in this context, Masiv Rava, so Rava challenges the idea. If that's the case, I understand why this works in general, why you want to make sure who the father is. But let's say you have a situation where there's a man and a woman who convert together. They also need to wait 3 months. But why? So let's say there's a man and woman, and they say they're married, and they say we want to become Jewish. So they both convert. Why do they have to wait 3 months before getting married? They've only been with each other. We know for sure who the father is there. So why do they have to wait 3 months? So Gemara says, I'll tell you why. So Hachinami Ika lahafim bein zera shenizra b'kedusha lazera shalom nizra b'kedusha. Here too, we want to distinguish between the seed that was conceived while his parents were in the state of kedusha, while they were Jewish, or if they had been conceived while they were not in the state of Jewish before his parents had converted. So that's the reason why we want to make sure to wait the 3 months. So the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, by the way, Tosfos points out from here we see that a ger is permitted to marry a gioris, even if they had a relationship beforehand. they're permitted to convert together and marry together. We wouldn't say, not like the position that says that they should become prohibited to each other. So the Gemara says, Rava gives a different reason. What's the reason, according to Rava, that all the women have to wait? It's not just to know who the father is because of the pasuk, Rava gives a different reason. Rava says, Rava gives four different reasons. He says, look at all these things, these terrible things that could happen if you don't wait 3 months and you don't know who the father is. And he says, one is Gezerah Shema Yisa as Achosam Me'aviv. If you're not sure who the child is, you might end up marrying your sister from your father. If you're not sure if it's from the first husband or the second husband, then another person might end up being married. And also Yavam Ashes Achav Me'imo. Also, you're not sure who the brother is, and the only time you're allowed to do yibum is if you're Ashes Achav Me'aviv, if you're the paternal brother. But if you're a maternal brother comes along and does yibum, that's a prohibition of kares, and you might end up, since you don't know who the father is, the person who's really only a maternal brother might end up doing yibum. And also in other cases, you might think that you don't have a child, and then the mother is going to go or the mother might think that the child is from the second husband, and then she might go out and think she doesn't need yibum or chalitza and go right away marry. And then also the yiftor Yevamos l'shuk. In other cases, we might think that since there's another situation is where, let's say she gets married right away immediately. Maybe if she was pregnant from the first husband, and then she gives birth 7 months later to the child, and people think that it's the offspring of the second son, and really it's the offspring of the first son. And then if she has a offspring from this father, but really if this offspring is from the first father, and he has no other children, and then the son has no other children and he dies, and he says, I have no other brother. And so therefore they could say, okay, she can marry anybody, but really he does have a brother. He just doesn't realize he has a brother because he's confused about who the father is. So because of all these cases, therefore he says you have to wait 3 months. So the Gemara challenges it. Must have Rav Chananya, Bekulan ani koreh bahen mishum takanas erva, bekam mishum takanas flood. So Rav Chananya challenges this because we have a source that states, going to the Brisa, the Brisa says, what's the reason why you need to wait? Because you're concerned that maybe you're going to be with your paternal sister, or maybe what's going to happen is your maternal brother of the Yibum. But the Brisa says, Bekulan, in all of these cases that the Chachamim say you're not allowed to do, that you have to wait 3 months, Ani Korba, and I say that the reason is Mishum Takonas Erva, because we're concerned that you might end up being with somebody who's an erva to you, somebody who's prohibited sexually to be with you. And here where we say that the reason is not because of Takonas Erva, but because Mishum Takonas Vlad. Whereas here the Brisa says that the reason why we say that all these women are permitted that these women need to wait 3 months, I'm not saying that the reason is because of Takonas Erva, but because Takonas Vlad. We want to understand who the offspring is. Vim Isa, and if the explanation is like Rava, who says that you might end up sleeping with the wrong person, it's not because we want to know who the offspring is. But cool, Mishum Takonas Erva. It's all because we want to prevent an erva. We want to prevent you from being with an erva. So the Gemara says, no, that's exactly what it means. Hi mishum takanas vlad to olifko b'hu erva. That's what it means. When we want to prevent the offspring from being messed up. We want to prevent the offspring from violating a takanas erva. So now the Gemara says, okay, but why do we require the 3 months specifically to wait? Bishlam, it makes sense to say tamtin beis chadashim. I understand why you want to say wait 2 months. Vitina say. It makes sense why you say you can't wait 2 months and then get married. Well, I understand why that's not acceptable. The Hainu Sveika, because that's exactly, we're going to have a doubt in that situation. We're not going to be sure Ibar Tisha Lakama, Ibar Shiva Labasra. Under that circumstance, we're not going to be sure if there's a baby that's born. We're not going to be sure that if you only waited 2 months and then you gave birth after you waited 2 months, you gave birth 7 months later, then the offspring could be 9 months from the first baby or 7 months from the second union. Now, why don't you say just wait 1 month and then get married? And what would be the problem? Why would that be effective? If you give birth 7 months later, then we're going to say it's 7 months after the second husband. If you're going to give birth after 8 months, meaning to say you wait 1 month and then give birth 8 months later, then we're going to say that it is from the first husband. So why don't we say just wait 1 month? If you give birth 7 months later, it's from the second husband. If you give birth 8 months later, it's from the first husband. Or if you're going to give 8 months later, equal. So the Gemara says. So the Gemara says if you're going to. The Gemara says no. The answer is even if the woman will give birth after 8 months, it's not a proof that the offspring was from the first son and from the first husband, and therefore she's now giving birth after 9 months. Because you could still say it's from the second husband, and she just waited a month before getting pregnant. Maybe she waited 1 month before getting pregnant. It's still a 7-month-old baby. It's a baby born after 7 months. So it doesn't disprove the fact that it could be from the second month. Where it says, okay, fine, I'll give you another way to do it. Why don't we say she should wait? Why don't we say that she should wait 2.5 months, not 1 month, but 2.5 months? Why don't we say that she should wait 2.5 months? What would be the effect of waiting 2.5 months? The was Shiva Yalda, because if we're going to say that she's going to give birth 7 months after that, we're going to say Hi Bar Shiva Labasrahu. If she gives birth after 7 months, then we're going to say under those circumstances, it's obviously 7 months after the second husband, because after the first husband, it would be 9.5 months, and that already is not effective. The Iwashito Palga Yalda, and if she give birth after 6.5 months, then we're going to say that it's obviously from the first husband because she gave birth before the time that was viable. So, and we'll say, so basically, if it was from the 6.5 months, Iwashito Palga Yalda, Hi Bar Tishal Kama would be obviously from the first husband. The Bar Basro, Bar Shito Palga, because if we want to say leave from the second husband, you can't live after 6.5 months. Gemara says that's not a good effective approach because Inami was Shitu Palga Yalda. No, it's possible because we could say if she gave birth after 6.5 months, Iko Amemor de Basrahu, it's still possible that it's from the second husband. Why? Why is it possible that if she gives birth after 6.5 months, it's still possible from the second husband? Because we learned to the Gemara Nido, and we're going to get to it in only around 4.5 years. The Gemara says, even according to the one who says that if you give birth after 9 months in a yoledas lemekutayim, that you're not able to, if you're going to carry the baby to term, it can't be done in half the month. It has to be the full month. Nevertheless, yoledas l'shiva, yalda l'shiva, yoledas lemekutayim. Then if you give birth after 7 months, there the baby can be born even though it's not the full month. Because it says about Chana, about the birth of Shmuel, it says and we learn from the phrase, it says, what does it mean, Tkufas Hayamim? Miyu Tkufos Shtayim. It means, the Tkufos means a minimum of 2. Miyu Yamim Shnayim. And Yamim means 2 as well. The days is 2. And so therefore, we know that the year is divided into 4 Tkufos. And each Tkufa is 3 months. So after Tkufos, meaning after 6 months, there's 2 Tkufos. So that's 6 months. And 2 days after Chana conceived, she gave birth to Shmuel. So we see that when it says that you give birth after 7 months in order for the baby to be viable, it doesn't really mean a full 7 months. It means 6 months and a few days is also viable. So then the Gemara says, so the Gemara continues, and the Gemara says, "V'tamtin mashu v'tinase v'chimau shlosha chadashim livtika." Well, why don't we say the following? Why don't we say that she should just wait a few days, and like a week or 2 weeks, and then she should get married, and then after 3 months, let's check and see if she's pregnant, and we'll see if she's not pregnant by then. We'll know for sure we'll see the point of her pregnancy. We'll be able to see if it's from the first husband or from the second husband. So Amar Rav Safra, ain bodkines nesuos shol yiskanu habalayan. We don't check the way they used to check. They had ways to check the woman's body. We say we don't check the married women because we don't want to make them their husbands to be repulsed by then. And so therefore, if she's going to marry the second one, we're not going to be able to check her because we're not going to be able to tell if it's the first husband or the second husband. Where it says, well, we don't have to necessarily check by testing her body. Nivdika bihilucha. We should check by the way she walks. Because if we look at the end of 3 months, we'll look at her imprint on the ground, and you could tell if she's pregnant because the steps of a pregnant woman will be deeper from the other woman. That's the way Rashi explains it. In the name of the Gaonim, in the Chuvas Gaonim. And so that will be sufficient. And since we're not investigating her body, we're just watching, that'll be sufficient. Amrami Barchama, that's not going to be effective either. Why? The woman will disguise the way she walks, and she'll be careful because she wants the second son, she wants the son to be attributed to the second husband, so he'll be able to inherit the husband. Gemara says, the Gemara says, fine, we won't investigate the way she walks because the woman's going to hide that. But nevertheless, we want to, if the whole purpose is so that the offspring is not in doubt, to not say, if we know for sure that she's pregnant from the first one, better get married right away because we know for sure that she's pregnant from the first one. So Gemara says, but why do we say that you're never allowed to marry the pregnant, the woman was pregnant at the time or was nursing at the time? And if you married, he has to divorce her and can never remarry her. But why? We know for sure she was pregnant from the first one. If the whole reason why you want to make sure that she's not pregnant is because we want to make sure that who the father is better be pregnant already, and then it would be okay to marry. Gemara says, no. What's the reason why a man can't marry a woman who's pregnant? Gezerah Shema Tasa Ubra Sana. We're worried that she could become pregnant again. It's extraordinarily rare, but it does happen. Maybe 1 in a billion, but it happens that she could become pregnant from the second man, and then the first baby will be damaged. Well, if that's the case, that we're concerned that she'll get pregnant again, then nobody should be allowed to be with their wife whenever they're pregnant. And we know that it's not prohibited to be with your wife when she's pregnant. If the whole concern is she might get pregnant the second time, then nobody should ever be allowed to be with their wife when they're pregnant. Gemara says, no. So some say, no, you can only be with your wife if she's using birth control. She'll use the birth control. Well, there's another approach that heaven is having mercy on her. And so therefore, that's okay. Heaven will have mercy if you're with your wife. Well, if that's the case, well, she should be able to get married, even though if she's pregnant from the first husband, she'd be able to get married from the second husband. Either she'll use birth control, or heaven will have mercy on her and she won't become damaged, or the baby won't become damaged but when she's with the second man. Gemara says, why don't we say the same thing? So what's the reason why that even when a woman is pregnant, she needs to wait 3 months? Because if she's going to get married and have relations, we're concerned that the man is going to damage the baby during intercourse, and therefore the baby will get killed. And so therefore, the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, why should, even if she's with any man, if she's married and she's pregnant, they should be prohibited to have relations because the man might damage the woman. The Gemara says the baby. The Gemara says the well, if she's married, that the husband will be gentler, and so therefore we don't have to be concerned that the baby will get the fetus will get damaged. Well, the Gemara says, well, in this case, also nobody wants to kill somebody. God forbid, a fetus. He doesn't want to kill a fetus, so of course he's going to be gentle. So the Gemara says no. So what's the reason? What's the reason that the woman, when even though we know she's for sure pregnant, she needs to wait 3 months before marrying? Is because the reason is not because we're concerned that the man is going to kill the baby, the fetus. Because as a baseline, a woman when she's pregnant, she's intending to nurse, and so therefore we have to be concerned. Dilba iabra umiachar chalba v'katlo. We have to be concerned. Maybe she's going to become pregnant if she's nursing, if she gives birth and she's nursing, then we have to be concerned that maybe she's going to her milk will become ruined because she'll become pregnant right away after she gave birth, and then what's going to happen is her milk is going to dry up and she's going to end up killing the baby, or the baby will end up dying. And the Gemara says, if that's the case, even if she's married, she should be prohibited to have relations because maybe her milk will dry up if she's pregnant. So the Gemara says, no, if she is married to the second man and then she becomes pregnant while she's nursing, then the mother will give eggs and milk. Even if her milk dries up, she'll give eggs and milk and supplement to the baby. Well, so the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if it's the baby's from a different father, she can also give him she'll also support that baby with milk and eggs, and she'll supplement. Gemara says, no, the second husband is not going to want to support the first husband's child, and so therefore he's not going to give him the food. Gemara says, with Bina Yarshim. So we'll let the heirs of the first baby will go to court and say child support this baby. Gemara says, Isha a woman will be embarrassed to go to the court, and so therefore she's not going to want to start the legal proceedings, and so therefore in the end the son will be malnourished, and the offspring will die, and so for this reason, a woman is not allowed to remarry if she is pregnant from the first husband. So we learned in the Mishnah that all of these women need to wait before betrothing or getting married, whether they are virgins or whether they're fully married, whether echad besuos ve'echad p'uos, echad mesuos ve'echad arusos, whether they're virgins or fully married, whether they're fully married or whether they're just betrothed. So the Gemara says, why did it say in the Mishnah besuos and also arusos, and also gambuos and also nesuos? Hainu besuos, hainu arusos, they're the same thing. And hainu behuos, hainu nesuos. So why does it need to repeat it? So the Gemara explains, Amar Rabbi Yehuda hachikamer. This is how we have to read our Mishnah. That our Mishnah is saying, achas besuos ve'achas beuos. Meaning to say whether they are virgins or whether they're fully married, i.e., whether they are widowed or divorced, whether from the betrothal or from the fully marriage, meaning to say there are all these circumstances, they need to wait 3 months. So we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says that if they were nesuos, they can get betrothed right away. And if they were betrothed, they can get fully married right away, except for the betrothed women in Judah, because they had, in the land of Judah, because they had yichud. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says all the women can get betrothed, except for a widow, because she's in mourning. So the Gemara says, how do we rule? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer did not go to the base medrash. Ashkechelo Rabbi Asi. He found Rabbi Asi. Amarle, my Amar Rabbanim Beit Midrash. So Eliezer says, what did the rabbi say today in base medrash? The law is like Rabbi Yossi. Again, what did Rabbi Yossi say? All the women can get betrothed except for a widow because she has to wait because she's in mourning. So from the fact that we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, we see that he's only arguing with a yechidah. He's only arguing with an individual. He's not arguing with the stam, with the anonymous, because the anonymous would be with the majority, because we wouldn't rule like Rabbi Yossi against the majority. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi says, indeed, that Rabbi Yossi is arguing with an individual, not with the majority. Tanya, we learned, let's say she was accustomed she to go to her father's home, meaning to say she wasn't with her husband, or she had been in a fight with her husband, or let's say her husband was in prison, meaning there's no possibility she was with him, or let's say her husband was elderly or sick, or let's say she was sick, or let's say she miscarried after her husband died, or let's say she had been unable to conceive, or zakeno, katano, illness, all these cases where it's impossible for her to have a child, or clear she had some medical condition, unable of giving birth, incapable of giving birth. Meir says that under those circumstances, she still needs to wait 3 months. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda materly arisly nasim miyad. Rabbi Yehuda allows her to get betrothed and marry right away. And so we see from here that the position that says that even if she's not capable of becoming pregnant, she still needs to wait 3 months. That's Rabbi Meir. And so therefore, that's consistent with the Tanakama of our Mishnah, that the Arusa also, that one woman who's just betrothed, also needs to wait 3 months. That's Rabbi Meir. That's Rabbi Meir, and not the majority position. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Chazer bo Rabbi Yochanan. But Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, even though Rabbi Yochanan said the law was like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind. Amar Rabbi Yossi says, if Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind and says you always have to wait 3 months, we must need to the karma hadarbe. He changed his mind because of a brisa that was taught in Karen B'Yavneh. What did they say in Karen B'Yavneh? Tanya Amar B'Shmuel B'Nosher B'Yochanan Broka Shemati B'Pi Chachamim Karen B'Yavneh. I learned from the Chachamim in Karen B'Yavneh. Kulan Tzrichos Ahamtin Shlosha Chadashim. Everybody needs to wait 3 months. No matter what the excuse is, no matter the impossibility. If your husband's in Japan, you have to wait 3 months. So Rabbi Yirmiyah. So that's how we learn. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan reversed himself and said you have to wait 3 months. So Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Zreika, Ki Ailis Lakamid Rabbi Avo, Rami Mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Halacha Rabbi Yossi. I asked him, does Rabbi Yochanan say the laws like Rabbi Yossi? Amar Rabbi Yochanan Halacha Kastam Mishnah. But then Rabbi Yochanan say the laws like the anonymous Mishnah. What does the anonymous Mishnah say? Utanan. How could you say that the laws like Rabbi? How can Rabbi Yochanan say the laws like Rabbi Yossi when our anonymous Mishnah says that the law is you have to wait 3 months under all circumstances? So Rabbi Zreika said to Rabbi Yirmiyah, whoever said this to you that there's a question, how could Rabbi Yochanan rule against the anonymous Mishnah and say like Rabbi Yossi that you don't have to wait if you know for sure she wasn't pregnant? That's clearly a person who doesn't he's not careful with what comes out of his mouth. Because it's anonymous Mishnah followed by a dispute. And whenever we have anonymous Mishnah followed by a dispute, because it starts off anonymous, but then there's Rabbi Yehuda versus Rabbi Yossi, so that's a dispute. And whenever you have anonymous followed by a dispute, then we no longer apply the principle that the law is always like the anonymous Mishnah. Because Rabbi Yochanan says that there's a dispute followed by anonymous. There's 2 opinions in the Mishnah followed by anonymous. Then the law is like the anonymous. But if you have an anonymous statement in the Mishnah, and then you have a dispute, then the law is not like the stam, and therefore under those circumstances, we see that's why Rabbi Yochanan could rule like Rabbi Yossi. Okay, I'll take it if anybody has any questions.